93 Theory and Practice. I am joined again with Mr. Kyle. Today is a follow-up on our previous podcast we did together. So we're going to talk about, one, that Wim Hof method that we were introduced to. We're going to talk about further pranayama practices, and then just whatever tickles or pickle. So, Kyle, share with us, what has your life been like since our last get-together?
Oh, yeah. About that. So, immediately the following day, I wake up with just a different kind of perspective on life. Immediately more profound, thinking deeper into things. It made me not want to go to work, not want to, attach myself to the everyday work for something bigger than me, corporate kind of setting. I wasn't ready for it that day, so I was kind of detached from reality, but in a good way.
Yeah.
So it was just a profound, eye-opening experience for me. Not like a psychedelic trip or anything, but just a lot of knowledge and a little bit of time. Had to process it, but I came back with positive.
Nice.
Overall positive.
Cool, man. So you've been doing a lot of independent research yourself, looking into things?
Try to, at a surface level. Don't go too deep into one thing, or else I feel like I get into like a weird side of it, or I'll end up on a YouTube video where some person is super biased.
It's really easy to go down the rabbit hole, especially on YouTube.
Yeah, so I try to stay at a surface level, maybe read definitions, but I like research. Knowledge is power.
Yeah, for sure, man. That's awesome. So, you ready to learn some more today?
Absolutely.
Okay. So, last week we did our Wim Hof technique as far as hyper-oxygenating the body. If you're feeling up to it, let's go ahead and start the podcast off with a little bit of this breathing. I go ahead and want to invite anyone watching this, if you caught the first interview podcast where we attempted this and you got kind of a good idea of what it is, maybe did some research for yourself, I invite you to go ahead and attempt this with us. No pressure. It's early in the morning for us, so this might take us a little bit to get our engines going as well. So we're just going to be relaxed with this. Remember, the important thing is to not fight the feeling, to just allow it to happen. Bringing the air in, not allowing all the air to come out. So I'll do my best to try and guide as we actually do this. So let's go ahead and just get into a comfortable position.
Hell yeah, here.
Asana.
My knees can't handle that, believe it or not.
My knees can't either. Sometimes, like, when I'm in this for more than...
Would you draw focus to your knees? Because I immediately would.
Yeah. Well,
it would pull me out of a meditative state, I think.
The problem is I'm starting to feel my age a little bit.
Hey.
So it's like just being in any position for longer than 10 minutes. Like the knees, the hips, the lower back, and the neck. And it's like, then it's the real battle of meditation begins. And it's like when your body starts screaming at you.
There's going to be people watching like they're so young and they're talking about
Yeah. But you gotta remember, guys, us people close to millennial age or in the millennial group, we're constantly having our necks arched, looking at screens. We have horrible posture, and our pants are baggy. So there's a reason why we have these pains.
all hunchbacks.
All hunchbacks. All right. So we get into a comfortable position. Now the key is what I've kind of helped is to help keep from exerting yourself with too much chest movement is if you try and focus on keeping the shoulders relaxed, they're going to naturally want to raise, but that should be a raising from just the increase of the body. So like the increase in size of the body should just be the natural increase. So you don't want to try and force air using the muscles of the shoulders, which becomes a natural tendency, especially as you kind of start getting deeper into it. You start losing the mental focus on what you're doing. Well, like I said, just do it natural. Try and keep the feeling of ease, relax into it. You don't want to fight the process. You just want to let it happen. Remember, this is a natural thing that our bodies do. We've just kind of forgotten. So let's go ahead and start with, we'll do, depending on, I guess, how we're feeling, we'll do maybe 20 to 30.
Yeah.
So let's begin. Last one in, out. Now hold. Come in. Hold. Let's go out. Back in. In, out. No. Now try and focus into the head. Try and tense from the bottom of the spine up to the top of the head, however that feels natural. Now out. Now we're just going to take a few deep breaths in. Now hold that. So you might be feeling your heart beating very hard. Just dive into that feeling. Feel the pulse go through your entire body. Try and unite yourself with the pumping of your heart. Now out. No air in the lungs, and then we're going to hold that. Now back in. Out. In. Out. In. In. Keep doing this. Now breathe in and hold. Bring the focus to the top of the head, either the front top between your eyes or the top on the top of your head, the little cranial point. Whatever you feel you need to, breathe out, but hold it as long as you can. Now we return to just a natural, relaxed breath. So now, I just want everyone to take note of how they feel. So particularly in relation to how they maybe perceived how they felt before doing this breathing technique. So, of course, we didn't do the Wim Hof method exactly, but we used it as our foundational structure to then transition into some deeper breathing, or if you want to say just some introductory level pranayama. So, Mr. Kyle, go ahead and give us a summary of this one.
As you'll find out in the editing, the first round I did not. I think 30 is the peak, but the good amount to do. Also on the first round of 25 or 30. How many was it on the first time?
I honestly lost count a little bit, but it should have been somewhere between 27 and 45.
Wow. So I guess I lose track of that. But I wasn't doing a big enough in on the first time. On the second round, I immediately started smirking because I knew I had it down better, and started getting the tingling sensation in the hands again. Overall, I noticed. I feel like it like kind of wakes you up a little bit now that I'm saying it, because when you were just doing that little outro, I was just laughing to myself like I'm like wide awake right now, and I'm not attributing it to coffee because I don't drink coffee enough to I know but I know the feeling that coffee gives you. But this is more like my body is awake, pumping. I just feel more awake. I don't know.
Yeah.
At peace, more attuned to like individual sounds during the process. Afterwards, just overall a good feeling.
Nice.
That it can't be wrapped up in, I guess, words that easily.
Nice. Nice. Very good. That's essentially what we want to do. So these breathing practices primarily serve, I'll say, two purposes. The first purpose, of course, is to still and kind of equilibrate our physical forces. So the actual physical forces of our body, regulate our breathing, our mind, our circulation, heart rate, things like that. And also to bring us more in tune with those things, bring us more in tune with our bodies, come into more acceptance, and also just help us to live in our own skin better, because, well, when you're calm and relaxed, you can handle things quite a bit better. The other thing that I think these kind of breathing practices serve a good purpose for is, of course, heightening awareness. So, as you may have encountered doing the breathing, specifically holds, you would notice how easily the focus was either focused on something, or where it wasn't so important to be focusing on anything. Basically, your mind and your body were all pointing in one direction. You weren't in conflict with yourself, whereas in normal waking consciousness, you tend to have a lot of thoughts straying back and forth, whereas in this, you're highly focused on just your breathing. So in a focusing kind of a way, it's a good way. Now, when you turn that focus towards spiritual awareness, heightened awareness, consciousness, you can use it for what we would use it for, meditation and ritual, as a way to prepare the mind for intense, to prepare the mind for various things. So we've successfully oxygenated our bodies. We're feeling calm and focused, and we're ready to go deeper down the rabbit hole.
When you said to focus on your pulse, that was a helpful little tip there. I noted that calmed me, because I was distracted to a degree with the kind of, I don't know, I was just outside, and I wasn't inside.
Yeah.
And that helped me zone in. So appreciate that tip.
And it's good to focus. So I want to make a distinction. When we do these practices, it's convenient, most convenient, to bring focus inward. It creates a universal constant. So think of it this way. If consciousness is kind of in a sense, if consciousness is the consistent awareness of being, so you're conscious because you have a consistent flow of basically memory of data in the matrix that makes you, so you are consciousness, as Kyle. When we do these kinds of practices, we tend to try and focus our attention on something that's constant. We don't want something that's fluctuating because we're trying to still ourselves. So basically, if we focus our attention on something that's constantly changing, our focus is going to be changing, therefore it's going to be a little bit more difficult to still. So it's convenient or more beneficial to try and unite with something internal, like the heartbeat or the breath. It's not that heartbeat and breath necessarily are something magical in a sense. They are. I mean, the fact that prana is air, and prana is also spirit. Spirit in Kabbalah, we know spirit is ruach, it is air, it is shin, it is fire. Spirit encompasses a lot of things, and that is transmitted into being through air. If we remember the Genesis story of the Bible, God breathed life into Adam. He gave him consciousness, ruach. He gave him the ability to comprehend rationale. He gave him life. He gave him the chaya, the life force. But it was through air which he did it. So when you attach spiritual ideals to this air, so in pranayama, prani, meaning like the air yama, the breath control of that air, probably butchering that. I'm not as a master in Sanskrit. I'm just a foolish Westerner trying to understand Sanskrit. But pranayama, essentially, you unite to the ideal that there is this life force in the air, and that you absorb it when you focus the breath on that prana and you breathe it. So the reason you're alive at all times is because you're constantly cycling life force from the universe like a siphon. You're a big motorized siphon taking life force from the air, and through the air you're getting that prana. We also get prana, or in a sense we get prana energy in the form of solar energy from food, because the sun gives life to all vegetable life, which all animal life eats the vegetable life to get the food. That's how we get the life of the sun in the form of a photon hits a plant. The plant uses photosynthesis to convert those photons into forms of like glucose or sugars. Those sugars form basically the calories and the substance of which we eat. Our body basically converts everything to sugar. Sugar is the sun. So, but that's essentially, that's the form of prana in food. In a sense, it goes way, way deeper than that. Please don't take my interpretation as the dictionary definition of it. It's just my own extrapolations from various sources.
That's a good summary, though. I like how you wrote that up.
Yeah.
Sugar is the sun.
Yeah. Water, there's life force in water as well. Water being, if you think of water being a cup, it can have life in it. And so like microbial life or mineral life would be the prana source within water in a sense. Also magnetic polarity of water is also the prana source. So with conscious awareness of magnetic polarity of water, when you ingest it, basically conscious ingestion of water, you can essentially convert polarity. So one of the first teachings that you learn about and I really hope I'm not sure if I should say this. I guess there's books out there that say there is no secrets, guys. Sometimes
software.
But either way, this is a good point. Remember, I'm about to talk about Rosicrucianism. Just remember that word, okay? But this is a note. This is the new aeon. We shouldn't hide any of this stuff. We shouldn't. I understand secrets, oaths, things that you don't say under oath. I understand that. So anything that I've taken an oath to withhold, I won't say. But if there are books that you can get on the internet, if there are PDFs, articles that probably will say exactly what I will say that anyone else can get, there is absolutely no harm in me saying any of these things. So this is mainly just me getting over my own bullshit of of oaths and secrecy and occultism. So one of the first things you learn in Rosicrucianism, or at least that mode of esotericism, okay, is making what's called magnetic water. So your body is polar. We learn from the Kabbalion or the Emerald Tablets that all things are polar. There's positive and negative. This is the universal condition of everything reverts back to a polar condition, which in Kabbalah, the Jewish mysticism technique or system, essentially, the Kether is the unknowable crown. It's the unity, okay? But because it's knowable, there's the unknowable side of it, which is one of the symbols in Kabbalah for Keter, which is the very, very top echelon of God, essentially, is the picture they give is a man's face sideways. So you can only see one side is illuminated, so only one side is knowable. The other side shares its nature in an unknowable fashion. It shares its nature in a sense, if you want to view it in one way, it shares its nature in what's called the negative veils of existence. So the completely unknowable, even if you are manifested God, so below the abyss, below in this realm, so the highest level of God in any conception that we can conceive, essentially there's an unknowable side to yourself that is beyond the negative veils of existence, but that God can't even perceive it. But as a thought process, you can kind of conceive it as nothing. Because you can't even fathom what it is. The only thing that comes close to it is nothingness. Because nothing comes close to it.
Yeah.
But these are called the Ein Sof, and the Ein Sof Or. It means nothing, the limitless nothing, and the limitless nothing light, or the limitless light of nothing. Everything, so the original Ein, think of it like the singular point of nothingness. So like a black hole would be a good analogy. But it's not. But essentially, if you want to think of it that way. The outside force of the black hole, so everything that encapsulates, shares, and eventually sucks everything in, is that Ein Sof. It's the extension of that nothingness.
Right.
It's what encapsulates the nothingness. It's what gives point to the nothingness. The third condition is the light, or the interplay between those two things. So think of it like a black hole. You have the blackness of space. You have this, in our conception, like this warped circle.
Yeah.
That warped circle and the entire blackness of space is the Ein Sof. The central point that you can't perceive, but the very, very most minute, most densest, most energetic point is the Ein, so like that nothingness point. And then the pull into it and the condition of which we perceive as movement in thereof is the Ein Sof Or. And then from that, if you want to think on the other side of that black hole, is then Keter, and then all the other spheres on the tree of life. And then at the very end of the tree of life is us and our reality. So that's kind of a good way to view Kabbalah.
Yeah.
It's not in any way a factual view, but it's a good analogy if you want to play that. So, but Keter is still somewhat unknowable to us, because we have ego, because we have identity, because we are incarnate. That brings about the condition of duality. There is incarnation and what is not incarnate. So what is me, what is not me. What is awareness, what I am not aware of. So we are constantly in a state of duality. So all things being polar is literally just trying to waken us up to the fact that everything has two sides. There is subject and object in everything, in a sense. And on and off. Life, death, blah, 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 light, dark. So when we do these conscious things of like pranayama, we have the Ida and the Pingala. It's the positive and the negative polarity of the breath. The left nostril, the right nostril, the sun, and the moon. You have the middle pillar, which in the tree of life you have the middle pillar, and that's the Shushuma. That's the sun, the pillar of consciousness, essentially.
You mentioned that.
Yeah. And in the magical tradition, you have in polarity, you have the caduceus, the wand, which symbolizes the middle pillar, with the two snakes that intertwine. Those are the two polarities of your body, of life, of spirit, of knowledge, of everything. But dualism is essentially our highest conception. So when we consciously drink a water that we've made magnetically positive or negative, We're just acknowledging
Oh,
on a
there's
conscious basis, yeah.
Positive or negative.
Yeah, alkaline or acidic, essentially, is another way to put it chemically. pH, acidic or alkaline, positive, negative, blah, blah, blah. But not that it actually does something, although if you choose to perceive it as so, it does. But, like, holy water is a good example. It's not that it physically does something to it, like the Eucharist in the church. It's not that it's physically transformed into something else, but on a spiritual basis, you're acknowledging something about that makes it better than what it is. And then you're consciously bringing that into yourself. So you're consciously feeding better things into yourself. So when we do these breathing practices, or you energize water, or you pray over your food, or you have conscious awareness of your being, your body, your heartbeat, you're basically just trying to unite yourself with something, bring your focus to something, and then try and extrapolate something greater from that.
What is the process of holy water?
When you pray over water, you're putting intention over the water. You're putting the intention that the water be cleansed, and that the water itself be a symbol or a talisman of cleansing.
They could have got it from the tap. And
Yeah. Holy water essentially just requires, say for instance, if you're like a Catholic or an Orthodox Christian, it just requires an ordained minister or a priest, or a lay person, so like a lay person of faith. Essentially, anyone can create holy water, but the priest just kind of automatically kind of creates it, because he's the
shower, he's taking his showers.
And not quite like that. I mean, if you put intent into it, like as he prayed, like, Lord, let every water droplet be blessed with your glory, then perhaps, that might work. But essentially, if the priest being the vessel, the channel of sacrament, through his hands come the sacrament of the Holy Spirit. When he touches water and channels that source, he creates holy water. But any man who channels the Holy Spirit in the effort or intent of cleansing water will create holy water.
But this is a little different.
This is a little water. Magnetic water is the same process. You're calling down a higher source and then putting some sort of intent, or using vibration, which is the transmission of intent. Vibration is just like, I'm talking to you in vibrations. I'm just modifying those vibrations to signify intent, like what I'm intending to say. When you can't speak to something, like a crystal, you can't necessarily give it words, it's okay to just vibrate intent through sound.
I see what you're saying.
So instead of being like, rock, you are a healing rock, I would just, yeah. And then if I do it enough, I might feel a little bit of that, and then I've transferred it, in a sense.
That explains the, okay.
It's all ways of...
Because I've seen that before. I've seen that kind of practice.
At least for me, it's just varying ways and techniques of taking the formless, unknowable conceptions of ideas in your head, making them more and more conceptual, like from thought to vibration to symbol. This is the symbol. And I'm trying to take that thought and I'm energizing it with vibration or noise.
Yeah.
And if I do it enough, I will transfer that vibration, focus into my hands or out from my third eye or whatever. And then if I can properly convince myself through that process that I've transferred it to an object, that object now becomes holy or a talisman or you know what I mean?
Fill in the blank, yeah.
Yeah, fill in
So
the blank.
Hollywood's definitely taken a hold of this. I've seen that. Just transferring vibrations, energy.
Yeah.
That makes perfect sense.
Yeah. It's weird it's very weird on just a spiritual level watching it, but it's essentially, what's nice about it is when, at least for me, I try not to view my own viewpoints as being dogma or doctrine. So like, this is, of course I've been studying this kind of stuff for years, and some of what I say does come from like things that I've read, like books and articles that have come from other authors. But a lot of what I say is just my own extrapolation, so I don't want anyone to ever think that's how it is. But what's helped me is, like, now that I understand it, it kind of frees me from wiggly boogly conception of everything, because it's kind of like, oh, so I'm not really trying to summon conscious, universal, magnetic, holy cosmic energy through the archons of time, space, blah, blah, blah. You know, I'm essentially just trying to do a very natural process of categorizing thought and action and feeling and intent into one focus, basically, because a human being is, what I've come to understand are, when I talked last time about like heroes, very like prominent, cool people throughout time that like just do cool things because they've found some source of life. Yeah, like Crowley. But when I admire people like that, like in a sense, like Thelemic saints, so like in my kind of system of belief and practice, it's a Thelemic saint is essentially someone who's found their will and done it, and then basically given some sort of impact to humanity. So it further evolves humanity. So the conception of saint changes from someone who's just highly spiritual to someone who may be highly spiritual, but also practically beneficial to mankind. Because there's a lot of saints in every tradition, but very seldom does a saint in a particular tradition affect the outcome of humanity as a whole. So I'm focused on what affects humanity as a whole. Not that I think doing small goods in a small community where, you know, you're just affecting the trajectory of a few people or just your own life. Not that that's, in a sense, less, but we strive for the greatest known possibility, and we take our results as they come without attachment to it. That's the main, what I felt. But essentially what it's taught me is human beings are something great. Every person, every single individual. It doesn't matter how, well, it might matter what lot in life you were dealt, but essentially in most cases it doesn't even matter what cards you were dealt in life. We are born with the conditions to do phenomenal things if we can focus our forces. So man, an image of man is known as, or the image of man is God, in a sense, or the God of man is known as Tetragrammaton, Yod-He-Vav-He, the demiurge, Jehovah, okay, the Old Testament God. He's the creator God. He created everything. But for some reason, he doesn't like that creation, so he constantly tests it and punishes it. But that God, Jehovah, is symbolized, at least magically and esoterically, as the four-letter name Tetragrammaton, Yod-He-Vav-He. And those are represented as the elements: fire, water, air, earth. Represented as the four directions: south, west, east, and north. And then also represented as the four seasons of summer, autumn, spring, and winter. In that kind of using Yod-He-Vav-He formula. So, but essentially that's man, because man also, because he lives in those conditions, he must, if he goes in a direction, it is either north, east, west, south. If he attempts something, it is either of a fiery nature, a watery nature, an airy nature, or an earthy nature. If he requires sustenance, it comes separated in air, earth, and food, water for drink, and fire for warmth, and heat, and life, and heart. So the very nature that keeps us going is differentiated into fours. We live in the four seasons. It's all of that is us too. We are, in a sense, Tetragrammaton. We have four elements in us. We are made up of four elements. Neoplatonism, Plato was one of the first people to extrapolate that there was four elements in all things. It was Agni for fire, Terra for earth. I can't remember right now. But then the Hindus had another conceptualization of that called the tattvas, or the currents of spirit. The tattvas are Tejas for fire. It's a fire, like a red triangle. You have Apas for water, Vayu for air, and earth is Prithvi, body, and then you have akasa, which is spirit. Spirit's formlessness or preform. But in every tradition, essentially, a lot of times you extrapolate this four elemental basis of everything. That God being spirit, when he manifests, he in four elements. Man being spirit, when he manifests, he is four elements. Man is something great. We share in the exact nature of God. What separates us from God is our natures are going in opposite directions. What makes God Tetragrammaton special as God is his natures are going in one direction inward. What makes God perfected better than God Tetragrammaton is his natures have converged and now ascended into pure light. So, what I've learned is when one can somehow either focus or dissipate those four elemental forces within themselves. So their breath awareness, their physical awareness, their heartbeat for fire, their stomach is the center of water, your center of your emotions, you've stilled. When everything, every part of you, every element of you has been stilled, you touch spirit. You come in contact with the formlessness of being, the source of being. And then when you touch spirit, you can then transform in that. That's the substance of the transformation. It's the pure substance, the core. But what I've learned is human beings are capable of phenomenal things, of phenomenal changes. We can affect and create wondrous things. Essentially, though, only if we concentrate our focus and force. So some people are specifically gifted in a certain element. So the elements will have correlations to things that you do or express yourself in. So like water is like emotions. That makes kind of sense. Yeah. Air, the airy conception is like your thoughts, your ability to think. Fire is like will. It's right. your force, your energy level, determination. And then earth is basically your physical substance, your foundation. How grounded are you? How here, now, and capable you are. Do you have what's necessary to complete your goal? But these all have correlations to like our being. So when we still our mind, we still our emotions, we still our body, we still our desires, our will. We've stilled our entire being. Some people are particularly good at exciting those elements to extremes. Some people are particularly intellectual, so they have a lot of air element. So they can excite themselves in the airy condition, and they can affect change in that way. But it's always limited to mental conceptions. How people feel about it, so their watery conception of it, will always counterbalance what's actually being said. So the perception will always counterbalance that. So taking a purely intellectual approach into anything can be detrimental in lieu of feelings. Same thing with fire and will. Some people are really, really self-determined. But if they have not the resources to bring about what they determine or what they will, they'll come up short. They will fizzle out, explode. So they will funnel a lot of fiery energy into themselves and then burn out and explode, generally in anger. That's because the earth balances that out. The fire is it's formless, it's close to spirit, it's energetic, but it has no weight. The weight of earth balances that out and basically adds as a polar pull to that. So these things have correlations in us. So we understand that we are elemental beings and we can become very elemental beings. This is the meaning of elemental spirits. So like undines for water. So like in mythology you had these things called undines, like mermaids of the water. So when you would do magic rituals, you would summon undines, you would try and evoke the most watery conception of spirit you can consciously bring up. In rational terms, to me, that means you're bringing up as much emotional force as you can muster, to the point of, in a sense, even tears. Even if that's joy, sorrow, love, compassion, you still have an overflow of water, which is in the form of tears. So you're bringing about undine, at least to me. Airy conception are called fairies, or sylphs, something like that. So fairies would be fairies are the elemental beings of air. They're precocious. They come and go. They are airy and they float. They change and multiply and form, much like thought. You can't hold thought. Thought isn't something that's substance. Much like when someone becomes extremely airy, extremely airheadedness, they become like a fairy, very precocious and lightheaded. Same thing with fire. You have salamanders. Salamanders, or another sense is genie. But salamanders in the traditional sense are fire serpents. Everything they touch is consumed by their energy and force. In the same way, how do you not get bogged down by something? The earth, remember the earth element? How do you not get bogged down by that earth being trailed behind you? You burn it. You set it on fire, you turn it to ash. As long as you create a trail of fire behind you, the earth can't bog you down. So in a sense, a salamander is the attempt to annihilate obstacle. So you become very forceful, energetic, and you get shit done, but at the detriment to physicality. So you'll destroy your body, in a sense. But people can become salamandering. That's even a word.
Hey, it works when you've attached it to that.
And then in Earth, you have the gnomes. So the spirits of Earth are called gnomes. Gnomes represent the physical processes of matter, or work. They are the working class of the elemental world. So going through your intestines would, in a sense, be being pushed by gnomes. I don't know how to put it. I mean, the light that comes from the sun, in a sense, is collected by little gnomes in buckets and then dumped onto the flowers. It represents physical process, at least to me, physical form.
An animation of that.
But you can become like that, where your entire life and being becomes just a process or a cog in an entire structure of something. That's symbolized by gnomes. But those symbolize extremes in human elemental force, or an extreme in the expression of being a human. What I've come to understand is you can do a lot of really cool things with those extremes. You can become beyond human by becoming pure air, in a sense. You can become beyond human by becoming pure water. So having insight into things through emotion. So there's powers, there's magical powers in these elemental forces. It's astounding when someone is very earth-like, very down-to-earth, but also very hard-working, but to the extreme of that's all they ever do. It's astounding, almost robotic. To a normal person, it would be like that person is subhuman. They can work 20 hours a day, 7 days a week, and they just keep doing it. Like, that's not normal. They're like a gnome. Or that person is so smart, they can comprehend anything, but I can't tie them down to anything. I can't get them to commit to anything. They get a new idea and they float off to it. It astounds a person that they can have such intellect. They could have so many thoughts flow, so much creativity, but yet they're so ungrounded. So there's great power in this, just the inward force of just any human being. There's so much power. That's magical power. That's magical force. When we can focus in that one direction, we can bring about like some really cool stuff. The issue is, everything's polar. So as you focus into one polarity, one element, the opposite element has its influx, will have its return. What I've learned, though, is when you can focus those four things, either just when you can equilibrate those things in either an inward or an outward focus. So touch us back to when we were talking about meditation. When we want to bring our focus to something stable, it's okay if you have something stable on the external world, which is where like a crystal comes in, or like incense, or a candle, or a talisman, or a picture, or a statue. They're physical objects that don't change, in a sense. They're innate, dead. So they don't have life, so they don't move. Okay? So you're going to use that non-moving object as a focus of attention. So like a sound is another thing. The sound of a river. A river is very calming. The sound of your own breath. So if you have trouble bringing inward attention, the way you can transfer that is just listening to your breath.
In the case of the Wim Hof, though.
Yeah, in the case of Wim Hof, you'd really hear that. So But it's as long as you can, where you can focus your attention, you're going to focus your power. Is I guess what I'm trying to say. What these breathing practices teach you is like, if I focus my power into breath, I can really control it, and I control the effects of breath. If I really focus my attention to heartbeat, not that I can control my heartbeat, but I can control the effects of the heartbeat. Like, where is that heartbeat going? Like, I feel it here. In normal everyday life, I don't feel it at all. You know what I mean? Like, how do you feel alive if you don't feel your heartbeat? You know what I mean? So how do you feel completely alive? Feeling your heartbeat in every part of your body. So you consciously bring
Down
about
to
that.
the fingertips.
Yeah, down to the fingertips. It's just ways of awakening your consciousness and your awareness to just higher and higher levels of being, of knowing. That was a weird noise. So, yeah, I just went over a lot. I guess this is a good opportunity to explain this card. So remember I just told you about all the elements?
Mm-hmm.
This is called the Rose Cross.
I can see
Yeah, or the Rose Croix, if you want to say it in French. This is a Rosicrucian symbol. Remember I told you about Rosicrucianism? Rosicrucianism is like it's a mystery tradition. Think of it like a secret society, but the modern implication of this secret society isn't very secret. It's a cross, so it innately makes you think of a Christian symbol. Which, in a sense it is, and I'll explain why. Each one of these represents, remember, Tetragrammaton Yod He Vav He as an element. So I have air up here would be the Vav. I have water over here would be the He, the first one. Fire over here would be the Yod for fire. And then down here, this kind of earthy green color, sometimes it's black, is the final He, the princess, in a sense, in mythology. The daughter, so you have father. Oh, it also has correlation to father, mother, daughter, son. Father, mother, son, daughter. So this tetragrammaton is just a fourfold way of explaining literally everything. So if you can't understand something as being polar, positive and negative, you'll at least be able to understand it as being quadular. It's cubic form. It's physical form. So polarity is always something unknown. You don't see polarity in matter, in a sense. You just see the ramifications of polarity, which polarity polarize upon itself. It comes out in fours. I don't know. That's a weird way I've always put it in my head. When the one encounters the one, it becomes two, and the two encounters itself becomes four. So we understand everything conceptually as matter being
Right.
form. So tetragrammaton is here, but you got this little white square.
I was wondering about the
White square is spirit,
Okay.
which is unknown and known. Matter is the known aspect of spirit. Everything. So as above, so below. As within, so without. Keter is in Malkuth, as Malkuth is in Keter. The top sphere is in the bottom sphere. Heaven is in earth, as earth is in heaven. God is in man, as man is in God. Jesus would say, I am in you as you are in me. I am of the Father, as the Father is of me. So it's that aspect, that spirit, that relationship of acknowledging that everything was pre-form at one time and is now form. Everything was spirit at one time and is still spirit, but spirit being knowable is matter. Matter comes from the word mater, or meta, which comes from the word mother, which mother comes from the conception of formlessness and the giver of form. So, which mother is also the in a sense, the aspect of Holy Spirit, of generation. So, it's they come paired. So this is still earth.
I see.
But there's a separation. But you know, these three elements, they're not physical. They're not conceptual. So they're still above. There's a separation between what we conceive here on earth and even these three elements of like water, emotion, air, mind, and will, fire. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's like the chasm or void that separates these three elements. If you kind of think like your conception, your consciousness is here. This is your body. We have this void between what's in our head and what's on the outside. That's in a sense that void. The rose in the middle with another rose cross in it symbolizes the ramifications or the expressions of spirit. So it has 22 petals, symbolized by the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet.
Okay.
when God created the universe, he created the universe through the Hebrew alphabet, in a sense, in Kabbalah. So he first created Aleph, the breath of life. So when he spoke Aleph. Next, he needed a receptacle or a house of that life force. So he said Bet. Bet means house. Next, he needed a camel. I don't know. But he needed something else. So he said Gamel. And then he needed a door to the house. So he said Dalet. And then he needed a window. So he said He. You know what I mean? It's a building project. It basically just tells you that God built the universe using the Hebrew letter, using language. God is in the east. He is in air. God comes from air. The middle pillar on the tree of life is the pillar of air, with the pillar to the right being fire, the pillar to the left being water, or vice versa. Can't remember right now. But the central pillar, so the pillar on the left would be fire, the pillar on the right would be water. The middle pillar, so the central pillar of spirit, starts off as air, comes down as spirit, and then becomes earth, in a sense. This is the ramification. So our conscious awareness of everything comes from mind, from air. So our perception starts in our transceiver, which is our brain. It is conceptualized. God, the pure brain force consciousness of God, is then conceptualized through the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet, which those 22 letters correspond to everything in the universe. Everything. Every element, every planet, every zodiacal sign, every plant, every animal, every person, every physical force, natural phenomenon, scientific phenomenon, spiritual phenomenon. All of those are ramifications of those 22 letters, which are all ramifications of pure spirit, as being conceptualized as consciousness. The polar opposites of all those ramifications, so each one of those ramifications has its polar opposite or its polar condition. One, its polar opposite of itself, and then its elemental or conditional polar opposite, which then has a polar opposite of itself. Thus you have the four, being balanced. Okay, so that's the conceptual object of something, that's matter. But that play here, so the central feed comes into here, that's the first polarity of consciousness and then unconsciousness. Then you have the polarity of substance, being positive and negative, playing on that, bringing about the four. The four is still spirit. It shares in the nature of returning to spirit and also being the first implication of spirit being materialized, but then becomes earth, being the most material substance, the most knowable substance, being matter down here. So this is a way, much like the tree of life, of explaining everything in a pictorial form.
That's dope.
The symbols on the outside, you have the wand, the cup, the little caduceus. You have the wand, the sword. The caduceus is the wand. You have the cup and then the disc. So it represents, of course, the four suits of the tarot, the four elements, the four conditions of man, all converging upon this fact to bring about illumination. So it is by the equilibration and the adventure into those elements of which we unlock the knowledge of our rose cross, of our true being, of true existence. And we do that through various practices like meditation, pranayama, yoga, magic, ritual, prayer.
And here I am thinking it was just a cross on a card.
Oh, but it's a Christian symbol in a way, like I said. Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh means Jehovah, or Yahweh. When you put a shin, so spirit, the letter for spirit is shin. It's also ruach, the spirit of life that was given to man to make him conscious. So our spiritual consciousness is ruach. The very fire of God that enlivens us and gives us warmth and life and spirit. It's what that heartbeat in us, that fiery force, that shin. When you inject that into the four elements of being, tetragrammaton, you get Yod-Heh Shin Vav-Heh, Yeshua. Which Yeshua is Jesus. That's how it's Joshua, but essentially it's Jesus. That's how you say Jesus in Hebrew. It's how you say Jesus in Hebrew, essentially. That's how you get God, tetragrammaton, the four becomes the five, the pentagrammaton. How physical structure like this, which has no life in it, but you can refer all life to it. When you put life in it in a shin, it becomes a pentagram. The symbol for man, remember the Vitruvian man that Da Vinci did? He's in the form of a pentagram with multiple arms showing the ramifications, the furthering ramifications of man. Aleister Crowley, when he says when you're designing your altar, so like your magical altar, what you do things on, he says one of the best things you can put on there is the Vitruvian man. Because he symbolizes man as a whole. Man is four, his lower nature, his 2 arms, his 2 legs, symbolize the 4 elements. But he is also spirit. He is constantly being injected with life spirit through breath, through God himself, down into his head. That top point of the pentagram is spirit. That symbolizes man completely. So when you make God, when you inject God with life force, you put the shin in him, he becomes Yeshua, God knowable, God made man. He becomes Lord. He becomes man on earth. He becomes Jesus, Messiah, Savior. Becomes that manifestation. The aim of most mystery traditions is to awaken you to the 4 elements of your being, Yod He Vav He. Awaken to you how right now, because of your separate conditions, you are like Jehovah. You are an elemental being of 4 natures who shares those same natures and elements, are the same natures and elements in nature, which is the same nature and elements in the universe, which the universe is in itself God. The conceptualization of God. The creator that made all of that is God. So you share in the very nature of God, therefore you are a very aspect of God, you are in a sense God. But you're like an imperfect God. You're a lesser God. You're a God with like a little g. You still have the capability and the trajectory to become the big G God, the logos, the Godhead, But right now, your highest conceptualization of that can just be the demiurge, the jealous God, the God who will never truly understand his true nature, so he will constantly be rebelling against his own nature. So Jehovah, the jealous God of the Old Testament, can be viewed as like that us not knowing our true natures, we constantly rebel against ourselves because we view all conceptually negative conditions as being an affront to us. Therefore, when our people, which God's people, the Jews, are basically, they are the receptacle of God's will, so they represent God's works. When God's works didn't do what he wanted, when they turned against him, he would get angry and punish them. But he's the one that fucking created them. He's the one that can, it's all in, so it's that whole dichotomy of like constantly being identified by your creation and then destroying, you know what I mean? Like that whole bitterness, in a sense, is that first condition that you awaken yourself to, how you're constantly fighting. When you do these rituals and meditations on the elements, you see how the element affects you, either for better or for worse. And then you try and equilibrate that. To awaken to the fact that inside of you is that shin, that if you can only spark that little yod in you, that little fire in you, if you can only spark it threefold and create a shin, you would bring conscious spiritual light into yourself, and you'd be able to affect true change in matter that's like not just for the betterment of yourself, not just for the betterment of your family, not just for betterment from your immediate community, but for the betterment of humanity as a whole by spiritually, intellectually, emotionally, consciously, and physically elevating mankind to a higher level. That's the true nature of finding one's true will, is finding out how one can contribute in their own way to furthering the evolution of mankind in some way. So, but that requires the equilibration of your forces to understand your true self. So whenever you join a mystery tradition, the first thing you learn about is polarity, and then it drives you crazy. The next thing you learn about is how you think, then what you will, then what you feel, then what you concept. It's this process of finding things out about yourself while also finding the deep natures of the universe, while also finding out the deep natures of others. It's a way of unraveling the universe in elemental form and using correspondence and using terminology like angel, demon, spirit, elemental, vibration, things like that, which doesn't discredit the practice in any way. It gives it such validity because we are beings that love myth. We love tradition. We love symbol. You know?
Right.
We love art.
Right.
So the best way to carry out this knowledge from generation to generation is to convert this weird, highly conceptualized way of viewing reality, but still a way of like aiding to growth. But it's a good way of like carrying that tradition on. So it's a symbol. So as long as someone can devote the time in extrapolating the truth from a symbol, you will have a consistent way of teaching mankind. But that's essentially what I believe all mystery traditions are, is just a way of revealing those things to yourself, and then equilibrating those things, and then like ascending. So building a foundation upon yourself.
And everyone can do this.
And everyone can do it. Because what we learn, so this is what I want to tell people. You learn about these, like in the tarot, you have 4 aces, which represent the most, they're the Keter. So the 4 aces in the Tree of Life are in Keter, in the topmost sphere. So if you want to push the element of air to its most primal source, you can push it to a point to where it's like basically almost spirit. Like one more notch from being the pure nothingness, the pure transcendent essence of everything. Just, you can get it right there. You can get every element right there. Which proves to become an elemental god. That's basically what that is. You're like, you've pushed that archetypal conception of like what it is to be a fiery person to like the point of almost like this guy, if he willed, he could shoot laser beams out of his eyes and destroy the universe. You know what I mean? Much like, was it
From X-Men.
yeah, from X-Men. Actually, I was thinking of the Bhagavad Gita. When
What is that?
Bhagavad Gita is like the Hindu kind of Bible kind of thing. It's like a myth story.
Oh, I see.
But it starts off with, I think it's, oh god, it's either Krishna or Vishnu. I hate how I forget.
Oh,
Yeah, I am the destroyer of worlds. Behold, blah blah blah.
Man, I know what you're
Yeah,
talking about. I know what you're talking about.
In Egyptian terminology, the eye of Ra, or the eye of Horus in a sense, but essentially with one eye he creates the universe, with the other eye he destroys. Because with one eye he projects light, or he absorbs light to conceptualize the universe. With the other eye he projects light to destroy a universe. That's the farthest conception of fire, is that God. And you can embody that God. That's what invocation is. You can embody that I am so goddamn powerful, if I breathe, I will set fire to this forest. And people would be like, oh shit. But in a sense, the elements have that capability. But you will never, ever, going just east, reach the center. Get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's only by converging all of your forces in one direction that you can, all your forces in one conceptual direction, being either positive outwards or negative inwards, will you come to truth, true truth. And that true truth is who you are. Like, really. Like, from when the little seed of your father and the egg of your mom hit, that conceptual truth of what you are, that seed truth. So, like, right when those two polar opposites hit, and like God was like that third thing that was like BAM! That big bang, that truth, that instance is what you are really. It's before any other ramification of existence, before any experience, before you started the catalog of who Kyle is now. Before you even started that, that's the very moment of your tree becoming something. That's the Keter of your existence. By equilibrating all your forces, by stripping down everything that makes you, you come to that point, and then you can rebuild yourself. Or you can return past that, whichever way you choose. A bodhisattva in the Buddhist tradition, when someone becomes like a Buddha, anyone can become a Buddha. We are all the Buddha. All together we are the Buddha. But essentially, when we become the Buddha, enlightened to Buddha consciousness, we meditate, we surpass that veil of existence, we enlighten. There are those who choose to just stay in enlightenment, stay in nirvana, or go even nirvana into the realms of nothingness, Ein Sof, or and share in the pure existence and bliss of the natural condition of the universe. But there are those who tap into that and come back to help others. Those people are known as ascendant masters, spiritual beings, saints in a sense, but those are bodhisattvas. Bodhisattvas are returned bodhis who take back on kind of like a form of ego. So they have a way of interacting with people, which in the Hindu tradition and in the Buddhist tradition has some pretty hilarious ramifications. Because think of it this way, if you've blasted yourself out of all consciousness and you come back, you're really not going to give a fuck too much about societal things. So these people come back fucking insane sometimes, but it's cool.
That's cool. I mean, that's like, after our first experience, me waking up the next day just like detached from reality, they're doing it on a tenfold scale.
On like a daily basis.
On a daily basis. So yeah, why care about corporate kind of America?
Yeah,
or
exactly.
For that matter.
Yeah, why care about wearing clothes and cutting your hair and
exactly.
bathing, you know? So, but it just shows, but still, these are all just examples of like just how far you can push self-awareness. And these are all just practices of self-awareness. But when it comes to like, we have these ideal conceptions, so these archetypal conceptions of these elements. But we're always going to be limited by our own capacity to understand and retain those elements. So when you were born with certain strengths and weaknesses, of which you can work on. I was born with certain strengths and weaknesses. Everyone is born this way. We have what the astrology teaches us, like the natal astrology, when it tells you like your natal chart and like what it means with your birth sign stuff. All it really tells you is like your elemental balances in life, and then how that affects your personality. Which, in an idea, is really cool, and it works in some senses. But you have to understand it's just kind of a fun way of learning about yourself.
Chart on it.
Yeah. But it does teach us that, we have certain deficits in an element and certain excesses in an element. You kind of think you're born with 4 containers. Some containers are big-ass flower pots, and some are little cups. So some people are just not very emotional, and they can't handle a lot of emotion. Their cup is small or very flat. Or they're very physically weak, or they don't have very good physical strength, so like they're always sick or unable to carry out physical activity, things like that. That person, their pentacle is solid but brittle, in a sense. So we have these deficits and strengths. Some of us have fires, like it's called a crucible, or like I can't remember what it's called. Basically, what you burn your incense in. Some of us have giant bonfires of which to throw incense on and make a ruckus and cause, you know what I mean? Some of us just have little stick incense burners. You know what I mean? Some of us have the ability to suck in vast amount of prana and churn it into great amounts of thought. Some of us have little fish gill lungs and can't really process much. But not to make fun of anything or anyone, but essentially we're all born different. We're born equal, in a sense, because we're all incarnate beings. We come from the same source. But our elemental lot is sometimes mixed. This is the realm of mixed elements, in a sense. So we come to know what those elements are in ourselves, and we learn what our limitations in those elements. Now, you can always push your limitations. You can make your vessel of water bigger. You can reshape it. You can remold it. But to do that, you must first tap the transformative substance, which is spirit. You will never remold your cup by only trying to shove more water into it or pour water into it. You will only remold your cup by completely emptying it, going back to source, and then reshaping. Turning that cup back into clay, and then adding maybe some more clay, removing some clay, or just changing the form. But it takes a transformative experience, a transformative ideal, a transformative substance. In alchemy, we learn about the transformative substance. What turns lead into gold is this thing called, in a sense, mercury. This transcendent substance, this universal substance, this supreme substance is that aspect of spirit that allows us to mold, change, it's what keeps you. Have you ever been to, like, on the verge of doing something, like so willed, so determined to do something at the very last second, just change your mind, and it seems like your entire force of your being is all of a sudden just moved? That's facilitated by that transformative, transcendent force. Everything in you was in one trajectory, but something triggered by some catalyst, normally a thought, changed that polarity. You flipped. You didn't do it. Or you weren't going to do something, but at the last second you got this interjective source of energy of which you could now find yourself capable of doing it. Either way, spirit in that sense, Mercury in the alchemical sense, is that transformative force that transforms the forces of non-conceptual matter into matter, and then also converts matter back into the non-conceptual forms. So it's how we equilibrate ourselves, by trying to contact and understand spirit. So what we attempt to do when we do these breathing practices and stilling our bodies, you kind of notice that, like, it starts to become easy to especially when your eyes are closed and you're holding your breath.
I was going eyes closed.
You begin to be able to understand the universe as big black space. You know what I mean? As like nothingness.
Right.
And that you are just this conceptual thing witnessing this play of stuff. That's why a lot of beginning meditation practices is just based on awareness. So, like, what am I doing right now? How do I feel right now? Okay, what's going on right now? Okay, let's move past that. You know, and then you move past towards, like, that observing mentality. It's not me, I'm just observing me. And then eventually you're like, wait, if I'm just observing me, then I guess that's not me, because I'm something separate than what I'm observing now, just like when I'm awake. That cup's not me, because I can look at that cup. I can walk away from that cup. When you meditate, eventually, you'll be able to look at yourself and walk away from yourself.
I hear you.
And that's essentially what astral travel is, or astral projection. That's basically what it is. You, first, using imagination, you conceptualize your universe as being something conceptual. Then you use that to then conceptually move away from your conceptual reality. So, like, in this room, I would just kind of be laying down for a while. I would then start viewing myself as if I'm floating above myself. Mm-hmm. And then I'd kind of, like, open my eyes and become aware to the fact that, like, while my physical body is still here, my mental conception body is, like, able to move around. And because I've been aware of my environment for, like, the last few minutes, it's pretty easy to see all this. But then the test is I open that door and walk into that room and see what's going on in there. But what I've just successfully done is separated my ego conception of self from self. And now it's somewhere else. So we separate ourselves from ourselves, and then we observe ourselves. So, like, magic ritual, like, whenever I do rituals that involve a certain element, a lot of it is allowing myself to fall in to what I feel of that element. So, like, if I'm doing a ritual of fire, whatever excitement I feel, I will fall into it. So whatever emotion is resulted of that, whatever thoughts are resultant of that. So, like, I'll get stuff that correspond to fire. So, like, I'll light candles, right. And, like, I'll get talismans and symbols of fire, and then I'll get god names for fire. Like generally a good example for fire would be, like, the Hebrew name of Netzach, which is the fiery realm of Venus, which is an earthly kind of planet, but on the Tree of Life, it's a fiery realm. And when you're doing your certain types of rituals, Netzach represents the direction of fire in the south. But the god name in that is Yod He Vav He Zabayoth, which is Yod He Vav He, the four elements of armies. So the four elements actively warring. So I will invoke that god name. So I'll invoke that archetypal conception of fiery heat. It's the sphere of Mars channeling through the Tree of Life, through the sun, into Venus. That fire becomes the fire of Netzach. It's all conceptual, but essentially what ends up happening is I'll do a ritual and I'll invoke that sphere, and whatever happens. So I'll spend a lot of time putting intent into becoming fiery. So I'll summon a god name, or I'll invoke a god name, and then I'll summon the archangel of fire, which is Mikhail in the south, in a sense, in this conceptual type of ritual. The next one I'll summon an angel of fire. And then I'll summon like a spirit, or that angel will then send me a spirit. That spirit will be the most conceptually available idea of fire. That spirit will then convey a message to me in the form of an emotion, a thought, phrase, a word, a sound, a feeling, or a phenomenon happening. That's when things get exciting, when something outside your own sphere kind of happens, like candles that weren't lit all of a sudden get lit, or candles that were lit all of a sudden get turned off. Like, that's kind of cool stuff that happens in ritual that you're just sitting there like, whoa, sweet. But essentially I reflect on myself. As this is happening, I allow myself to kind of get into it, but then at the same time, I'm consciously, in a sense, somewhat observing my own, what's going on, so that I can then, so when I really lost control there, that thing from the past came up, and I was really fucking mad about that, and that made me really angry, and perhaps that's the source of when I get so angry I can't control myself. Perhaps that's an aspect of it. And then I use that to then formulate a water ritual, in which I delve into that thought and emotion, become involved in it, and work that out. And then I add new thought and life and substance in the form of mental conception to that, and then I formulate a new reality in Earth.
So you bring it all around.
Bring it all around. Yeah. If I stayed in fire, tapped into the source of my anger, and then decided, well, cool, I understand how to really fucking make myself real. I just got to remember this one thing. Oh, yeah. That has power in it. But that's to a detriment. You know what I mean? That's bad karma.
And there's people that want
that.
Go that.
Yeah. So you can become that extreme elemental force. You can become a demon of fire if you choose. Or you can equilibrate yourself, revert back to spirit, modify, become better. That's the transformative aspect of all of this. It's kind of, think of it kind of like it's a form of therapeutic psychology.
Yeah.
You know, you learn a new frame of reference, you attach merit and importance to that frame of reference. So like in my instance, it would be like Kabbalah and the Tree of Life and stuff like that, and the Tarot. So I give specific importance and correspondence to these things so that I can refer my own experiences to it, help me understand the chaotic mess that is life. Which, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I got you. That's profound. That's like, everyone has the capacity to kind of fight to hold on to this information, but I feel like people, you said everyone is capable, and I'm thinking of our worst run-ins with the people we deal with on a regular basis, and just like all of them are down the fiery route, it seems.
Yeah, it's, and the kind of the funny thing that you're encouraged to view people that you encounter as being elemental beings. So like,
it's all fire.
Yeah, all fire. So you think, how do you combat that fire? So what do we use to combat people that are normally angry? Compassion, understanding, sympathy, which are all watery conditions. So we invoke water to pacify their fire. Well, I should say, I generally tend to invoke air and intellectualize things, which then frustrates the person. It makes them burn out, and then different approaches, man. But that has a deficit to it because you're still just burning the person out.
Yeah.
Whereas water would liberate the situation. But that right there is transformative psychology. You're using what's called emotional intelligence, which is that's actually a really cool field. I studied a little bit. Emotional intelligence, like you have your emotional quotient, is that what it's called? IQ.
Yeah.
So your actual ability to rationalize. But then you also have this new thing now that certain people are trying to push called emotional intelligence. So it's your ability to comprehend things, but then your ability to extrapolate importance. Like, true importance from those things. So the watery side, essentially, of those things. But then in emotional intelligence, there's 4 elements. There's 4 sides. There's your fiery emotions, your watery emotions, your earthy emotions, and all that stuff. They don't conceptualize it this way. They still use the 4 colors of the elements, but they don't call them elements.
They don't.
No. Yeah. But essentially, emotional intelligence is like a good way of self-reflection. So it gives you like a intellectual, psychological structure for self-reflection and understanding your own responses to things. So, you would calm yourself, equilibrate the breath. They use these emotional intelligence people. The key to them being able to implement emotional intelligence therapy, like to improve emotional intelligence, is you have to first be able to regulate your biomus response. So you first have to learn how to breathe, focus your thoughts. So essentially what we've been doing. And then they teach you to equilibrate the 4 forces of your emotional intelligence. Yeah.
That's very similar.
Very similar. But you'll encounter this a lot. Like a lot of people will encounter this with, like Carl Jung was like the first person to correlate psychology, like hardline modern psychology, in the form of like Freudism. He was a contemporary of Freud, or I think even like a student of his. But he was upset that Freud would almost touch the unknown, almost touch the occult when it came to his understanding of the forces of man's being. But Jung was like, you need to push it further, because man has archetype, he has myth, and he has spirit. And you need to be able to extrapolate that in a person. So like Freud, the problem with Freud is Freudian analysis never ends. Because you're constantly receiving new influxes of experience, new environmental conditions, which shake the waters of your being. They add new conditions to your being. Therefore, you must analyze yourself again and keep it going. Jung is kind of the same way, but what you get from there is it's kind of the same way. You analyze the archetypes so that at least you get more of a foothold on it. And if you can at least analyze the archetypal, so like the grander scheme of like where your conditions come from, where your complexes come from, at least it's a little bit better than doing the day-to-day analyzing, where it's like I have to analyze the day-to-day things to extrapolate truths. I understand the greater truths, therefore I can always just refer that back to my day-to-day existence. So it's a different way of viewing it. It's a spiritual mentality versus the highly physical, psychological mentality. And what we're seeing nowadays is I'm seeing a lot of people merging those 2 things. So like the Freudian mindset of analysis with the Jungian mindset of archetypal, kind of analysis and integration. So like when people come up with this, it's interesting that when you come up with these things like emotional intelligence, it looks a lot like what gurus teach and mystics teach and stuff like that. And it makes it hard to accredit such things, because it seems weird. Like you have these people like Wim Hof, who from interviews I know he's studied like mystic traditions and stuff and meditation, but he doesn't come from that purely mystical side. He's very practical with it, but it has its roots in those things. They are linked and they are the same thing. It's just it's our, I don't know. This, like I said, these cards represent everything in the universe. So I can safely say that there is a card in here that represents a Tesla car. There is a car in here that represents me tripping on the sidewalk on the way to the market.
Things like that, and things.
And then there's also cards in here that represent eternal elemental God forces as natural phenomenon in the universal scheme of how things work in consciousness. But essentially, everything comes from everything. Everything is linked. Everything is one. So all of this theory that we go through is just to try and awaken someone to the fact that you share the same conditions of everything. You affect these conditions. Consciousness is the moldable force of those conditions. If you can affect and control consciousness, you can affect and control your universe. You can transform, become. You can, or dissipate, dissolve, and return. It's whatever you trust. That's all this stuff is. It's the last few thousand years of nerdy people collected knowledge and then just carrying it on in weird symbols. So, this is an interview. I've been talking for a really long time.
But that's a good, like, a breakdown, just a complete breakdown that puts it into perspective that I needed. I needed that.
Yeah.
Because I didn't know how, I'm behind. I need to do some digging on this. But when I come in here and look at things like a symbol, I'm not going to just take it as just a symbol anymore. I'm going to expect a deeper meaning. So now I'm looking around like, what else is there? So he has a lot of things in here that are interesting. Wow.
Yeah, it's... Symbol was really, really important to Carl Jung as well. The fact that man is a symbol and man lives through symbols. Same thing. Everything we interact with is a symbol. A stop sign is a symbol for halting. Red is a symbol for stopping. Green is a symbol of go, of life. Those are color symbols.
And those kind of fluctuate.
And those fluctuate depending on consciousness and environment. The symbol of the cross is a really good one. To anyone that's in the consciousness of only the last 1,500 years, the cross is a Christian symbol. For someone who shares in the consciousness of someone maybe 3,000 years would view it as a symbol for earth and life. People who would view it from the consciousness of, say, 10,000 years would view it as the convergence of life's forces into material being. It's every truth has a deeper truth, which has a deeper truth to that, which eventually refers back all to the same one truth. I like in witchcraft how, I can't remember, I think it was Gerald Gardner's book called, oh god, I wish, Modern Witchcraft, Practical Witchcraft, something like that. But in that book he had a really good description of how magic worked. So trying the magical theory of how doing a ritual, eventually how burning an incense, lighting a candle, saying a chant, and praying to a deity, how that eventually became acquiring $2,000. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, magical formula is basically how you would conceptualize that process. But the theory behind magical formula is the theory he put of the net or the web. In that you see a great web of connectivity. So think of the stars, and they're disconnected, disjointed. People are disconnected, disjointed. Realities or objects are disjointed, disconnected. But we all share in the same map and schema of existence. We are all part of existence. We are all part of matter. In the great net of things, you can take any one point and any other point, and because they are connected, you can affect those 2 points through their interconnectivity. So when you do a ritual, you are doing things on a spiritual and subconscious, etheric, astral, whatever way. You're affecting changes in this realm of the web, lighting a candle, burning an incense, and saying a chant does this kind of thing. That as the energy funnels down the web will eventually become this. That might be a butchering of it, but that's how I understood it when I was 16. When I read the book for the first time. But yeah, you're causing a chain reaction. The butterfly effect is a really good way of explaining it. I'm creating this butterfly flap of a wing through my ritual. I am affecting the slow currents of existence with my gentle force of intent, which then gains magical power and force to then become a tsunami in Japan. You know what I mean? It's
I'm laughing about that. But.
Yeah. It's that whole thing. It's the whole chaos theory from a sea of chaotic nothingness, from a disconjointed sea of just chaos, comes the structuralization of things. From that you can extrapolate and make things. From the chaos comes order. Ordo ad caelo. Yeah, it's all of that. It's
And people that worship chaos because it eventualizes and materializes in like change and something new.
And chaos symbolizes the primordial truth of existence. Because think of it this way: you come from source. That source is in a sense chaotic because it's uncontrolled. In a sense it's uncontrolled. There is no control. Everything that we perceive is a modification of consciousness. It's a structuralization of an unstructured ideal. So, like in the tree of life, you have 3 spheres above the abyss. Those 3 spheres are things like the Holy Trinity, but they're not really you can't physically correspond them to anything. The closest thing you can correspond one of the spheres to is the planet Saturn, which in our conceptual view, Saturn is usually viewed negatively because Saturn is the giver of form, but he's also like the force of like judgment, of like payment, reciprocity. But above the abyss, in the supernal realms, payment is just the exchange of energies. It's freely given and freely taken. Whereas below the abyss, with identity and ego, when stuff is taken, it's seen as an affront. When stuff is given, it's seen as a gift. Where above the abyss, it's just the same thing. There's no opposites. Polarities are basically, it's not as important. Or at least the moralistic implications of polarity isn't important anymore. But those 3 supernals, you can't conceptualize them until they become the 4th Sephira, which is symbolized by the planet Jupiter. So Saturn is viewable, but it's like we don't want to mess with Saturn very much because, like, in a sense, it seems like they don't care because it's very like, this is the way things are. Like, really, I'm not going to change for you. You're just a modification of my consciousness.
Yeah.
It's kind of like that. So chaos, which is represented by the 2nd sphere of duality. So you have Keter, which is unity, oneness, becomes Chokmah, which means wisdom, but Chokmah is also chaos. It is that duality, so that the possibility of yes, no, on, off, light, dark, creates the first conflict, which is symbolized in the next sphere. So Chokmah is like, you have bright white in Keter. Chokmah is like a little bit of darkness, it's gray, so it's like, it's light, but with a reflective tint to it, of black, in the form of gray. Then you have what that reflective tint of black symbolizes, and that's form, black in Saturn, which is the 3rd sphere of the Trinity, which is Binah, which means Binah means wisdom. Chokmah means, I'm getting confused myself. But anyway, Binah means like the great mother in a sense, but it's Saturn. So blackness, form, giver of form. Chokmah is chaos. So you have complete rampantness and then complete structure. And those form the first dualities. And then those dualities manifest into a 4th condition in Jupiter as Chesed, which is mercy. Chesed would be viewed as the demiurge. Being the number 4, the 4th sphere, it's like it shares in the nature of Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, of Tetragrammaton. So Jupiter is also like the king deity in like the Greek planetary structure. He's like the ruling king, just like God, the Father, is king of the universe. Same thing. It's Jupiter. Io-Patar is the Io-Patar. Io is Io is one. It's like a Greek, like how you call someone, like a person. You would say Io. You're acknowledging. I'm the E. You're the O. I. You're O. Self-other. It's polarity. Eo is the first duality of polarity. It's me, you, Io. And then Patar means pater, like father, I think, or something like that. So father of original duality, who would be the fourfold father, who is positive, negative, but also the positive as negative and negative and positive polarity against each other as like 4 elements. Like fire and air are positive elements. Water and earth are negative elements. Air is just the negative polarity of the positive polarity of fire. Earth is just the most negative of water. So those polarities play out and become iyopata. That's my own weird conception. I don't remember what pitar is, so it could be something different, but essentially I think that's the conception behind it. But yeah, everything always goes back to 4, then goes back to 2, and then somehow you need to reconcile the 2 into the 1. And that's its own whole field of initiation and thought. But our goal is, to recognize the 4 conditions of ourselves and then rectify those, like surpass the duality. Just don't even mess with the 2, and then just go straight for the 1.
Straight past.
Yeah.
You'd be tempted. But.
Yeah, you'd be tempted, but that's the conceptual reality, and then the only way we can understand it is